Every year, hundreds of people die in the United States without anyone knowing their names. They become numbers in case files, sketches on bulletin boards, unidentified remains cataloged in databases that span decades. They're called Jane Does and John Does, placeholders for the nameless dead. But behind every case number is a person who's missed: a daughter, a mother, a sister, someone who laughed, dreamed, struggled, and ultimately deserved to be remembered by their real name. For decades, families searched for answers, while unidentified remains waited in evidence rooms in unmarked graves. Then, something changed. Advances in DNA technology, the dedication of volunteer genealogists, and databases like nameless in the DNA Doe Project began turning the impossible into reality. This is the story of 7 women who were once known only by the places where they were found. Women who remained nameless for years, sometimes decades, before determined investigators in cutting-edge science finally gave them back their identities. Tonight, we remember them not as Jane Does, but by their true names. This is their story. On July 14, 1980, a maintenance crew working in an almond orchard near Delano, California, made a grim discovery. Hidden among the trees, they found the body of a woman who had been sexually assaulted and stabbed 29 times. She was estimated to be between 25 and 45 years old, stood about 5 feet 4 inches tall, and had distinctive tattoos on her left arm, one reading, "Mother, I love you," and another reading, "Love you, Shirley, Seattle." The tattoos seemed to offer a critical clue. Was her name Shirley? But despite this promising lead, no one knew who she was. Kern County authorities documented the tattoos and circulated them widely, hoping someone in Seattle would recognize a woman named Shirley with this exact tattoo. They checked missing persons reports across multiple states and created composite sketches. DNA was collected from beneath her fingernails. She had fought back against her attacker, but no match was found. She became known as Kern County Jane Doe No. 5. Just 3 days after her body was discovered, another woman's body was found in Ventura County. She too had been murdered and remained unidentified. In 2008, DNA from both victims matched Wilson Quaust, a convicted serial rapist who had been imprisoned since 1980. He had murdered both women within days of each other in July 1980. In May 31, 2018, a jury made an extraordinary decision. They would try Quaust for murdering 2 women, even though neither had been identified. On May 31, 2018, a jury convicted him of both murders. He received 2 life sentences without parole. Justice had been served, but the women still had no names. In July 2018, Kern County partnered with the DNA Doe Project. The DNA samples from 1980 were highly degraded, and analysis revealed the victim was of Indigenous First Nations descent from Western Canada, a population significantly underrepresented in DNA databases. In February 2020, the DNA Doe Project launched a Facebook campaign targeting Indigenous communities in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, posting a facial reconstruction and asking people to upload their DNA to help identify her. Violet Seuss, a woman in Alberta, saw the post. She had been searching for her missing aunt for nearly 40 years. When she saw the facial reconstruction and read about the tattoos and Indigenous heritage, she immediately suspected it might be her Aunt Shirley. Violet transferred her DNA profile to GED Match. Days later, the match was confirmed. In February 2020, 39 years and 7 months after her body was discovered, Kern County Jane Doe No. 5 was finally identified. Her name was Shirley Soosay. The tattoo had been telling the truth all along. Shirley was born on February 6, 1945, and was 35 years old when she was murdered. She was a member of the Samson Cree Nation in Massachusetts, Alberta, Canada. Shirley had 7 siblings and was close to her family. She eventually settled in Vancouver, British Columbia, and was known for her love of traveling. The family continued receiving cards and letters from Shirley until 1979, when the correspondence suddenly stopped. Violet began searching for her aunt in 1980, but found no trace. She never stopped looking. Though Wilson Quoust was convicted of Shirley's murder, he has refused to provide any information about how he encountered her or the circumstances of her death. Shirley's remains were returned to her family, and she was laid to rest with the Samson Cree Nation. She was one of the first Indigenous persons identified through forensic genetic genealogy, a breakthrough that has opened new possibilities for identifying other missing and murdered Indigenous women. For nearly 40 years, Shirley Soosay was known only as a case number and a sketch, but she was so much more: a daughter of the Samson Cree Nation, a sister, an aunt who was loved and missed every single day. Today, Shirley is remembered by her true name. Her family finally has answers. She is nameless no more. On July 26, 1974, a young woman walking her dog in the dunes of Provincetown, Massachusetts, stumbled upon a scene that would haunt the Cape Cod community for nearly 50 years. Partially buried in the sand near Race Point Beach, she found the severely decomposed body of a woman. The victim had been brutally murdered, sexually assaulted, beaten, and nearly decapitated. Her hands had been removed, likely to prevent identification through fingerprints. Whoever killed her wanted to ensure she would never be identified. But he underestimated the determination of those who would spend decades seeking justice on her behalf. The victim was estimated to be between 20 and 40 years old, stood approximately 5 feet 6 inches tall, and had reddish-brown hair. She had several distinctive dental features, including expensive crown work that suggested she had access to quality dental care. She wore only blue jeans, the Wrangler brand, which investigators noted. Her body had been exposed to the elements for weeks, possibly 1 to 2 months, making the investigation extraordinarily difficult. Massachusetts State Police created composite sketches and circulated them widely. They checked missing persons reports. They consulted dentists across New England, hoping someone would recognize the dental work. She became known as the Lady of the Dunes, one of Massachusetts' most enduring mysteries. Over the years, the case generated numerous theories. Some investigators believed she might have been a victim of serial killer Tony Costa, who had murdered several women in Provincetown years earlier. Others suggested connections to organized crime. In 2002, the case received renewed attention when investigators noted a woman resembling the victim appeared as an extra in the film Jaws, which was being filmed in Martha's Vineyard around the time of her death. This led to speculation, but no concrete answers. DNA technology has advanced. In 2000, investigators exhumed her remains to extract DNA samples. The profile was entered into databases, but no matches emerged. Still, she remained Jane Doe. In 2022, 48 years after her body was discovered, investigators partnered with the FBI's Enhanced Victim Identification Team and forensic genealogical experts. Using advanced DNA analysis and genealogical research through public databases, investigators began building a family tree. They traced maternal and paternal lines, they contacted potential relatives, they eliminated possibilities, and followed new leads. The work was meticulous and time-consuming, but in October 2022, they found their answer: The Lady of the Dunes was identified as Ruth Marie Terry, a 37-year-old woman from Tennessee who had been living in the Boston area in the early 1970s. For nearly 50 years, she had been known only by where she was found. Now, finally, she had her name back. Ruth Marie Terry was born in Tennessee in 1936. She had worked various jobs and had connections to the Boston and Cape Cod areas in the early 1970s. Family members who had lost touch with Ruth decades earlier were contacted by investigators. Some had assumed she had simply moved away and started a new life, a common occurrence in the 1970s when long-distance communication was difficult and people sometimes intentionally disappeared to start over. They never imagined she had been murdered and left in the dunes. Ruth's murder remains unsolved, though investigators continue pursuing leads with renewed energy now that they know her identity. The Massachusetts State Police have asked anyone with information about Ruth's life in the summer of 1974, who she was with, where she was staying, who might have wanted to harm her, to come forward. Her family, after nearly 50 years of unknowing, finally has closure about what happened to Ruth, even as they grieve what was stolen from her. Ruth Marie Terry deserved better than to be remembered as a nameless victim in the dunes. She was a real person who lived, worked, and mattered to those who knew her. Today, she is no longer the Lady of the Dunes. She is Ruth Marie Terry, and her name will not be forgotten. On April 24, 1981, a trucker driving along Interstate 71 near Troy, Miami County, Ohio, spotted something unusual in the ditch alongside the highway. It was the body of a young woman. She had been beaten to death with extraordinary violence, her facial injuries so severe that visual identification would be impossible. She had been dead for several days, possibly up to a week. But what made this case particularly haunting was what she wore, a distinctive fringed buckskin jacket adorned with beads and intricate needlework. It was handmade, unique, and clearly meant something to its owner. Investigators hoped the jacket would be the key to identifying her. Instead, it became her only name for the next 37 years. The victim was estimated to be between 18 and 30 years old. She stood about 5 feet 1 inch tall and weighed approximately 110 pounds. She had light brown hair and was wearing the distinctive buckskin jacket, yellow gold pants, and platform shoes typical of the late 1970s or early 1980s. Miami County authorities launched an extensive investigation. They photographed the jacket from every angle and circulated the images nationally. The craftsmanship suggested it might have been made by someone in the Native American community, or perhaps purchased at a specialty shop. They created composite sketches, though the severity of her facial injuries made this challenging. They checked missing persons reports across the Midwest and beyond. No one came forward. She became known as Buckskin Girl, defined by the jacket she wore in death. For decades, the case consumed investigators. The Miami County Sheriff's Office never gave up. They re-interviewed witnesses. They pursued every tip. When DNA technology became available, they carefully preserved samples. The case attracted attention from amateur sleuths and forensic artists. In 2012, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children created a new facial reconstruction, hoping fresh images might trigger someone's memory. Buckskin Girl's case appeared on television shows, in podcasts, and across social media. Thousands of people knew about the young woman in the distinctive jacket, but no one knew her name. In 2018, the Miami County Sheriff's Office partnered with the DNA Doe Project, a volunteer organization using forensic genetic genealogy to identify unknown victims. Volunteers extracted DNA from preserved tissue samples and uploaded the genetic profile to genealogy databases. Then they began the painstaking work of building family trees, tracing relatives backward and forward through generations, following branches until they converged on possible identities. The work took months. Volunteers worked hundreds of hours, researching census records, obituaries, birth certificates, and family histories. Finally, they found a match. On April 11, 2018, 37 years after her body was discovered, Buckskin Girl was identified. Her name was Marcia King. Marcia was 21 years old when she was murdered. She was originally from Little Rock, Arkansas, though she had lived in several different places during her short life. Marcia had a difficult childhood and had spent time in foster care. As a young adult, she had traveled extensively, sometimes hitchhiking, a common but risky practice in the early 1980s. Family members who had lost contact with Marcia years earlier were located by investigators. Some had filed missing persons reports in Arkansas, but in the days before national databases and computerized records, the connection to the unidentified body in Ohio was never made. The distinctive buckskin jacket, it turned out, was something Marcia had acquired during her travels, a treasured possession she wore proudly. It had been the key investigators hoped would identify her, but without the technology to connect it to her family, it simply became her memorial. Marcia's murder remains unsolved. The Miami County Sheriff's Office has renewed their investigation with the critical advantage of now knowing her identity. They've been able to retrace some of her movements in the months before her death and are pursuing new leads. Investigators believe Marcia was likely hitchhiking and may have been picked up by someone who killed her. They've asked anyone who may have seen her or encountered her in early 1981 to come forward. For 37 years, Marcia King was known only by the beautiful jacket she wore. She was reduced to Buckskin Girl, a nickname, a mystery, a puzzle to be solved. But she was so much more than that. She was a young woman navigating a difficult world, trying to find her place, traveling and seeking connection. Today, Marcia has her name back. She is remembered not as an unidentified victim, but as a person who lived, traveled, and deserved justice. She is nameless no more.
On November 1st, 1980, a prison inmate on work detail near Huntsville, Texas, made a discovery that would haunt Walker County for the next 4 decades. Lying in a ditch alongside Interstate 45, just outside the Huntsville city limits, was the body of a young woman. She had been sexually assaulted, beaten, and strangled. She had been dead for approximately 1 to 3 days. She appeared to be a teenager, perhaps 14 to 18 years old. She wore distinctive clothing, blue jeans, a yellow pullover shirt, and orange socks. She had sandy blonde hair and stood about 5 feet 2 inches tall. But despite her young age and distinctive appearance, no one reported her missing. No one came looking for her. She became Walker County Jane Doe, a child who died alone, far from anyone who knew her name. Walker County authorities and the Texas Rangers launched an intensive investigation. The proximity to Huntsville, home to several Texas Department of Corrections facilities, raised questions about whether she might have been visiting someone incarcerated there. Investigators created composite sketches and age-progressed images of what she might have looked like. They circulated her description nationally through missing persons networks. They noted several distinctive features. She had a noticeable gap between her front teeth, a small scar on her left forearm, and pierced ears. Her clothing brands were documented. The jeans were Wrangler, size 10. Fingerprints were taken and entered into databases. Dental records were carefully documented, but nothing matched any missing persons reports. Over the years, numerous theories emerged. Some investigators believed she might have been a hitchhiker traveling south on I-45, which runs from Dallas through Houston to Galveston, a common route for young runaways in the 1980s. Others wondered if she had come to Huntsville to visit a prisoner and was abducted afterward. Still others speculated she might have been a victim of a serial killer. Several operated in Texas during this period. The case was featured on television programs and in true crime publications. Amateur sleuths proposed dozens of possible identities, matching her to various missing persons cases from across the country. But every lead led nowhere. Every possible match was eliminated through DNA testing or other evidence. Walker County Jane Doe remained a mystery. As DNA technology advanced, investigators exhumed her remains multiple times to extract better samples. Her DNA profile was entered into CODIS, Combined DNA Index System, and other databases. In 2015, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children created a new facial reconstruction using updated forensic art techniques. The image was distributed widely, generating new tips, but still no identification. Genealogy databases were expanding rapidly by the late 2010s, creating new possibilities for forensic genetic genealogy. Walker County investigators took notice. In 2021, Walker County partnered with Othram Labs to perform advanced DNA analysis and forensic genetic genealogy. Using DNA extracted from her remains, Othram scientists built a comprehensive genetic profile. Forensic genealogists then uploaded this information to public genealogy databases and began the meticulous work of constructing family trees. They traced maternal and paternal lines backward through generations. They identified distant cousins. They researched obituaries, census records, and family histories. Slowly, the branches of the tree converged toward a single possibility. On November 8, 2021, 41 years and 1 week after her body was discovered, Walker County Jane Doe was identified. Her name was Sherri Jarvis. Sherri was just 14 years old when she was murdered. She was from Forest Lake, Minnesota, a suburb of the Twin Cities. In the summer of 1980, Sherri ran away from home. Her family had reported her missing, but in the chaos of the early 1980s, before national databases and computerized record-keeping, her missing persons report in Minnesota never was connected to the unidentified body found in Texas months later. Sherri's family had spent 41 years not knowing what happened to her. They had wondered, hoped, feared, but never stopped searching for answers. When investigators contacted them in 2021, the news was devastating and, in a strange way, a relief. The not knowing had been its own kind of torture. Investigators believe Sherri likely hitchhiked from Minnesota southward, eventually making her way to Texas, a journey of over 1,000 miles. Hitchhiking was more common and socially accepted in 1980, though it carried significant dangers, especially for young women traveling alone. She may have been heading to the Gulf Coast, or perhaps had no specific destination, just running from something and towards anything else. Somewhere along Interstate 45, she accepted a ride from the wrong person. Sherri's murder remains unsolved. Walker County investigators are pursuing new leads now that they know her identity. They're working to retrace her journey from Minnesota to Texas, identify possible suspects, and finally bring her killer to justice. Her family, after more than 40 years of agonizing uncertainty, has been able to bring Sherri home. She was laid to rest in Minnesota, finally reunited with those who loved her. Sherri Jarvis was just a child, a frightened, troubled 14-year-old looking for escape. She deserved protection. She deserved safety. Instead, she found violence and death on a Texas highway far from anyone who knew her name. For 41 years, she was known only as Walker County Jane Doe, a number, a sketch, a mystery. Today, she is remembered as Sherri Jarvis, a daughter, a child, a person who mattered. She has her name back now.
On July 16, 1980, two young boys playing in a vineyard near Arroyo Grande, California, a small coastal community in San Luis Obispo County, made a discovery no child should ever make. Hidden among the vines, they found a woman's body. She had been murdered, strangled, and left in the remote vineyard. She had been dead for several days to weeks. She was young, likely in her late teens to mid-20s, with light brown hair and a slender build. She wore distinctive jewelry, a turquoise ring and a necklace. Her clothing suggested someone who took care in her appearance, but no one knew who she was. San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's detectives worked tirelessly to identify her. They created composite sketches. They documented every detail of her appearance, clothing, and jewelry. They checked missing persons reports throughout California in neighboring states. The vineyard where she was found was relatively remote, suggesting her killer chose the location deliberately, somewhere her body might not be discovered for a long time, if ever. Investigators estimated she was between 18 and 25 years old and stood approximately 5 feet 4 inches tall. She had no obvious identifying scars or tattoos. Her dental work was documented and circulated to dentists throughout the region. Still, no one came forward. She became known as Arroyo Grande Jane Doe, defined by the place where her life ended. For 40 years, the case remained unsolved and the victim unidentified. The original investigators retired. New generations of detectives inherited the mystery. The case file was reviewed periodically, but yielded no new leads. The composite sketch appeared in databases dedicated to unidentified persons. Cold case advocates kept her memory alive, posting about her case on social media and true crime forums. But her name remained a mystery. As DNA technology evolved, San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office preserved samples from the original autopsy. When genealogy databases became available for law enforcement use, investigators saw new possibilities. In 2020, the Sheriff's Office partnered with the DNA Doe Project to attempt forensic genetic genealogy identification. DNA Doe Project volunteers extracted and analyzed DNA from the preserved samples. They uploaded the genetic profile to genealogy databases and began building family trees. The work was methodical and time-consuming. Volunteers traced maternal and paternal lines, researched historical records, and contacted potential relatives. They eliminated false leads and followed promising branches of the family tree. After months of dedicated work, they identified a possible match. On June 30, 2020, 40 years after her body was discovered, Arroyo Grande Jane Doe was finally identified. Her name was Tammy Terrell. Tammy was approximately 20 years old when she was murdered. She was originally from Roswell, New Mexico, though she had traveled to California in the months before her death. Family members had lost contact with Tammy and had filed missing persons reports, but in the days before centralized national databases, the connection to the unidentified body in California was never made. Tammy was described by those who knew her as friendly and outgoing. Like many young people in 1980, she had traveled west seeking opportunities and new experiences. California's coastal communities attracted young people from across the country. Tammy's murder remains unsolved. San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's detectives have reopened the investigation with renewed focus now that they know her identity. They're working to retrace Tammy's movements in the weeks and months before her death, where she stayed, who she knew, who might have wanted to harm her. They've asked anyone who knew Tammy or encountered her in California in 1980 to contact them. Her family, after 40 years of uncertainty, finally has answers about what happened to Tammy. They've been able to give her a proper burial and memorial, honoring her memory with her true name. Tammy Terrell came to California with hopes and dreams. She was young, full of life, exploring the world beyond her New Mexico hometown.
She deserved better than to die alone in a vineyard, forgotten and nameless for 40 years. Today, Tammy is remembered by her real name. Her family knows what happened. Her memory is honored. She is nameless no more.
On October 16, 1988, a hunter in northern Indiana's rural Lake County made a grim discovery in a wooded area near U.S. Highway 30. The decomposed remains of a young woman lay hidden in the underbrush. She had been murdered, likely strangled, and left in this remote location where she might never have been found. She was estimated to be between 16 and 25 years old. Decomposition made visual identification impossible, but investigators noted she stood approximately 5 feet 5 inches tall and had brown hair. Most remarkably, she wore a distinctive necklace with the name Julie on it, a piece of jewelry that seemed to offer the clue investigators desperately needed. But was her name really Julie, or had she borrowed the necklace from someone else or purchased it at a thrift store? She became known as Julie Doe, but that name might not have been hers at all. Lake County Sheriff's detectives launched an extensive investigation. They circulated information about the Julie necklace, hoping someone would recognize it. They checked missing persons reports for anyone named Julie or variations of the name. They created composite sketches based on skeletal reconstruction. Dental records were documented and circulated. Fingerprints could not be obtained due to the condition of the remains. The necklace seemed like such a promising lead, but it led nowhere. Missing persons named Julie were accounted for. The necklace itself was a common type, available in many stores. Julie Doe remained unidentified. For 31 years, the case remained cold. The original investigators retired. Technology advanced, but without DNA databases and genealogy tools, there were few options for identification. The case appeared in databases of unidentified persons. Amateur sleuths proposed various identities, matching Julie Doe to missing persons cases from across the Midwest. But every lead was eliminated. Every proposed identity was ruled out through evidence or family DNA testing. In 2019, the Lake County Coroner's Office partnered with the DNA Doe Project to attempt forensic genetic genealogy identification. Volunteers extracted DNA from bone samples and created a comprehensive genetic profile. They uploaded it to genealogy databases and began the meticulous process of building family trees. The work involved tracing multiple generations, researching census records, obituaries, and family histories. Volunteers worked hundreds of hours, following branches of the family tree until they converged on a likely identity. On October 17, 1999, 31 years and 1 day after her body was discovered, Julie Doe was identified. Her name was not Julie. Her name was Pamela Jean Walton, and she was just 24 years old when she was murdered. Pamela was from Kentucky. She had brown hair, stood about 5 feet 5 inches tall, and was traveling through the Midwest in 1988. Family members had lost contact with Pamela and had filed missing persons reports, but the connection to the unidentified body in Indiana was never made. In the late 1980s, information sharing between states was limited, and missing persons cases often went unsolved simply because the right connections weren't made. The Julie necklace that had defined her case for 3 decades turned out to be exactly what investigators had feared, either borrowed, found, or purchased secondhand. It had nothing to do with her real identity. Pamela's murder remains unsolved. Lake County authorities are pursuing new leads now that they know her identity. They're working to retrace her movements in 1988, identify who she may have been with, and finally bring her killer to justice. Her family, after more than 33 years of not knowing, finally has answers. Pamela was brought home to Kentucky
and laid to rest with her family. For 31 years, Pamela Walton was known by a name that wasn't hers, defined by a piece of jewelry that had led investigators astray. But today, she is known by her true name. She is remembered as Pamela, a young woman whose life mattered, whose family never stopped wondering what happened to her. She is nameless no more.
This final case is perhaps the most heartbreaking of all, because it involves not one victim, but two, a mother and her infant daughter. On June 28, 1997, a woman's torso washed ashore in Hempstead Bay, Long Beach, New York. The remains had been dismembered and bore a distinctive tattoo, a heart-shaped peach with a bite taken out of it, with the word Peaches written across it. She became known as Peaches, identified only by her tattoo. Then, on April 11, 2011, 14 years later, more remains were discovered during the investigation into the Gilgo Beach serial killings. Scattered in the brush near Jones Beach were the skeletal remains of a toddler, estimated to be between 16 and 24 months old. DNA testing revealed a stunning connection. This child was the daughter of Peaches, the unidentified woman whose torso had been found 14 years earlier. Mother and daughter, both murdered, their killings potentially years apart. Both were disposed of in areas near Long Island beaches. The discovery suggested a horrifying possibility, that Peaches may have been pregnant or had a young child when she was murdered in 1997, and that the child had been killed separately, or that both were victims of the same perpetrator. For years, investigators worked both cases, hoping advances in DNA technology and databases would finally reveal their identities. The tattoo of the peach was shown on television programs, in news articles, and across social media. Surely, someone, somewhere, knew a woman with that distinctive tattoo. Surely, someone had noticed a young mother and toddler disappear. But no one came forward. As DNA genealogy technology advanced in the late 2010s and 2011, investigators saw new hope. In 2023, Suffolk County Police Department and the FBI partnered with genealogy experts to perform advanced forensic genetic genealogy on DNA samples from both Peaches and Baby Doe. Genealogists built extensive family trees, tracing maternal and paternal lines backward through multiple generations. They researched census records, obituaries, social media, and family histories. After months of intensive work, they identified a match. On August 4, 2023, 26 years after Peaches was found and 12 years after Baby Doe's discovery, both victims were finally identified. Peaches was identified as Kern Vergata, a 34-year-old woman from Manhattan. Her daughter, Tatiana, was identified as Baby Jane Doe No. 3. She would have been approximately 2 years old when she was killed. Kern Vergata lived in Manhattan in the 1990s. She was known to frequent areas of Manhattan where street-level sex work occurred, a dangerous reality that placed her in contact with violent predators. Family members had lost contact with Kern and little Tatiana in the mid-1990s. Missing persons reports had been filed, but in the chaos of missing persons cases from that era, particularly those involving women engaging in survival sex work, the connection to the unidentified remains was never made. Kern and Tatiana deserved protection and safety. Instead, they encountered violence that ended both their lives. Kern and Tatiana's murders remain under investigation. The proximity of their remains to the Gilgo Beach serial killer dump sites has raised questions about whether they might be connected to that case. In July 2023,
architectural consultant Rex Huemaker was arrested and charged with multiple murders connected to the Gilgo Beach case. Investigators are examining whether he may be connected to Karen and Tatiana's deaths, though no charges have been filed in their cases as of this recording. Investigators are also exploring whether Karen and Tatiana were killed at the same time, or if Tatiana may have been killed later, a particularly disturbing possibility that suggests the child may have been held for a period after her mother's murder. Karen's family, who had searched for answers for decades, finally knows what happened. The confirmation that both Karen and Tatiana were murdered has been devastating, but it has also ended years of painful uncertainty. They've been able to properly honor Karen and Tatiana's memories, acknowledging them by their true names and ensuring they're remembered as mother and daughter, not as Peaches and Baby Doe. Karen Vergata was a mother trying to survive in a dangerous world. Her daughter Tatiana was an innocent child who depended on her mother for protection. They deserved safety. They deserved life. They deserved to be remembered by their names, not by a tattoo or a case number. For 26 years, Karen was known as Peaches. For 12 years, Tatiana was known only as Baby Jane Doe No. 3. Today, they are remembered as Karen and Tatiana Vergata, mother and daughter, loved and missed. They are nameless no more.
Shirley Soosay, Ruth Marie Terry, Marcia King, Sherri Jarvis, Tammy Terrell, Pamela Walton, Karen and Tatiana Vergata. 7 women, 8 lives, decades of silence. For years, sometimes for decades, they were known only by the places where they were found or by distinctive features that couldn't reveal their true names. They were numbers in case files, sketches on posters, mysteries to be solved. But they were always more than that. They were daughters. Some were mothers. They had families who loved them, communities that missed them, lives that mattered long before their deaths made them famous. Today, thanks to advances in DNA technology, the dedication of forensic genealogists and investigators who refuse to give up, they have their names back. Their murders, most still unsolved, remain active investigations. Detectives continue pursuing leads, hoping that identification will finally lead to justice. But even without arrests, something profound has been restored. Their identities, their names, their dignity. We remember them not as Jane Does, but as Shirley, Ruth, Marcia, Sherri, Tammy, Pamela, Karen, and Tatiana. They are nameless no more. If you have information about any of these cases, please contact the appropriate law enforcement agency. Even decades-old memories could be the key to solving these murders. If you found this documentary meaningful, please consider liking this video, leaving a respectful comment, and subscribing to support more in-depth true crime coverage that honors victims and their families.